No.
You're a little more.
Oh, from your house.
Oh, my house, yeah.
Yeah, you wrote.
I hate to admit it, you will not see me riding on to meetings. Just cross the trail. No. Well, and the classic thing with skunks is that they get scared and freeze. And just sit there and look like a skunk.
Welcome, everyone, to our joint meeting with the City Council and the BPAC Committee.
A bicycle or a Buick or something.
Thank you.
You get a demerit. Just kidding. I really like this committee, the BPAC, because right away they knew where the food was and they went right to it. Yeah, so good job, good job. Normally we have to give instructions. We didn't with you. So welcome. We're going to go around the room here and introduce ourselves so we know who everyone is at the moment. My name's Lisa Gilmore, Mayor Santa Clara.
Teresa O'Neill, council member.
Dominic Caserta, council member.
Patricia Mahan, council member.
Deanna Santana, city manager.
Brian Doyle, interim city attorney.
Rod Derrida, your city clerk.
Marshall Johnson, coordinator for the BPAC.
Jim Parasini, new guy on BPAC.
Tom Granville, BPAC member and also a member of the VTA BPAC.
Craig Larson, the BPAC second term.
I'm a little short.
Diane Harrison, BPAC member.
Ken Kratz, BPAC member.
Tondo, new BPAC.
I'm Pat Colson, I'm the world's nicest council member.
Kathy Watanabe, City Council. Debbie Davis, City Council.
Thank you. And Carol?
Hi, Carol Chariot, Principal Transportation Planner.
Great, thank you. We have had a recent history of having joint meetings between the City Council and all of our commissions, and we're fortunate that you've agreed to meet with us, so we appreciate that. We are trying to really find out what you're doing in BPAC, although Teresa is filling us in constantly on the very short meetings you have, right? And the level of passion for your committee, we really appreciate that. So I'm going to turn it over to Teresa to give us a little introduction, and then hopefully we can open the floor up for you to give us some information on what you're doing and what you'd really like us to focus on in terms of working with you and your committee and all the issues we have.
Well, maybe before Don grabs his food, if he could just quickly introduce himself. Just, or anybody pass him a microphone.
Hi, I'm Don Stirk, recent appointment to the...
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So what I thought I would do is I tell people that the BPAC is probably the most engaged committee and commission that we have in the city, and that they are probably all the smartest too. They're very, and the people who come to the meetings are very engaged and know their topics. And so we have very spirited discussions about what should be the priorities, what should not be the priorities, and recognizing kind of somewhat the restraints, the constraints under which our traffic engineering department with Marshall and Carol are both parts of, and Marshall is our primary staff liaison. You know, the fact that we don't really have dedicated funds for bicycle or pedestrian in Santa Clara, that we are almost completely, except for our staff time, completely reliant on having grants. And so oftentimes we have discussions about what should be the highest priority items. And as I said, there's always that constraint about whether staff is going to be able to get a grant and there's even divisions. Some of the members of the public who come don't agree. So what I thought I would like to do, since I'm always saying how articulate you all are, is maybe if you would take turns talking about some of the issues that you see, since you're all, and like Tan also, she is like, her group, she works at Mission College, and she started an effort to have like a bicycle safety group there, and they're looking to find ways for the students and particularly employees to be able to more safely commute by bicycle or in combination with VTA to the Mission College campus, and there's been some issues with that. So I think she's going to really bring in some added perspective that'll be very valuable. And lots of the other members of our committee work in the high-tech industry, and so they're doing things like taking the San Tomas Aquino Creek Trail or other designated bikeways to a lot of the jobs that are at the northern part of our city. So I thought I would just turn it over, and if there's one of you that is in between bites that wanted to kind of start off. So Jim is also a new member, but we also had the benefit of him being a retired city staff member for many years, so he has that perspective. So anybody that wants to kind of start, okay, Diane, why don't you kick it off?
Well, I put down 4 things too, which have nothing to buy, so I'll save on those. But the biggest thing I'd like to see is bike lanes on El Camino, to make that a priority, whether it's with the new bus rapid transit system or whether it's a new paving that's going to happen, hopefully in a year. Whatever it is, I think the only way it's really going to happen is you get rid of the street parking, which at least in the city of Santa Clara, I don't see as being all that necessary. We have got huge parking lots for every business. You know, if the employees have to park a block away, the employees have to park a block away, but you could fit the customers in those lots and get rid of the street parking, and that way it would be no problem to put in bike lanes. Hopefully sooner rather than later. Sunnyvale has them in a section. It's working just great. So I don't see why we couldn't. So that's my number 1. And then the second thing is something I've brought up some of the meetings. Well, I brought up this one too, is just education.
Diane, I have a question before you move on. Sunnyvale has bike lanes on El Camino. Do they have street parking on El Camino?
Not at that section.
Okay, not in that section. There's
It's not
no
the whole
street
thing.
parking?
It's not the whole thing.
Okay.
It's from Saratoga, Sunnyvale, past to Remington, I think, something like that.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No problem. No problem at all. So other people may not have known. As education, I think this would solve a lot of problems, including the poor driving of a lot of people, is to start education. That we had a speaker come, and she was kind of on the same wavelength, which was interesting. You start out with teaching walking, you know, from...
Oh, can you speak in there? Because are we being taped?
Not a problem.
There,
To have,
that's good,
I would call it driver education from kindergarten on, or first grade on. Basically teaching kids how to walk, how to cross the street safely, and so forth. By walking in groups, making it part of the physical education. Then when they feel like up to it, they progress to biking, and they learn the rules of the road. And then once they get to driver's education and training, they're not starting from ground zero. They're starting from a point of knowing an awful lot, except the mechanics of how to operate a car, and they'll be much safer drivers that way. So that's another thing that's really important to me. Thank you.
The education on the pedestrian and the biking might be a nice project, and although in our city school liaison committee meeting, Teresa, don't we talk about that?
Well, and
education in the schools.
And Diane referred to a speaker, so the staff has engaged a very capable consultant, because Marshall was able to obtain quite a large Safe Routes to School grant, which now I guess we're calling verbs or whatever. I can't lose all the acronyms. So we're going to have quite a rigorous endeavor to work with more of our schools and to make materials available to the schools that aren't on the list to have a lot of the in-person training, that they will be able to access all the materials and the use of the consultants. I don't know, Marshall, did you want to say anything else about that, or?
It's on, excuse me, it's ongoing. They started this fall. And of course, we had brought the consultants to the BPAC to introduce her. It's Pat Hines from Safe Moves. She kind of gave an overview of what the program is about. And I know there was some concern because we are reaching out to 12 of the Santa Clara Unified School District schools in Santa Clara. There are a few that are not in there, but Pat has agreed that because she's a profit corporation, she would do her best to provide some of the literature and kit materials that we are doing as part of the program for those schools as best she could. Obviously, we're trying to get to all the schools eventually, but these schools were kind of given to us from the school district, so it wasn't that we just picked them randomly. So we have to work with the school district as we move forward with this program. But we're pretty excited because she's got a very good reputation moving forward.
And I gave her my copy of my program too.
Great.
So she was interested in that.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was said was that we only have one non-Santa Clara Unified school in the city limits of Santa Clara, and that is Eisenhower School, which is part of the Cupertino Union School District. And she indicated that they're not on this list. I mean, they do receive the benefits of other programs from the city, but at this time, they would also be eligible to receive the benefits of the consulting and the materials. And hopefully, when we do the next round or whatever, Eisenhower will be in the mix on that.
I mean, ideally, this would be statewide.
Right. Yeah.
And can I jump on that? I did Safe Routes to School research and planning school, so we did a lot of, we saw what other cities were doing in terms of safe routes to school. Like Palo Alto has a partnership within the city system. Their Parks and Recs actually allow some classes to do bike education for middle school students with their parents, and actually starting to go into middle school and just prepping for middle school, so just you're biking and walking to school more. So there's a Parks and Recs component there, but just looking at the different cities within the county, they are doing different activities, and there's opportunities to learn from best practices from those cities, as well as outside the county as well. But I appreciate that you brought up Safe Routes to School because working. I mean, education component, but working at Mission College, while I do database stuff, I still appreciate the practice of safe routes to school, getting our students safely to school, whether it's employees or students, but just having those safe routes available and showing that it is safer, right? And just actually practicing walking and biking more. And so it's holistic, that we do all the E's that's involved in Safe Routes to School. So we hope that it's encompassed in a program for Safe Routes to School, that you encompass all the E's. I think that works better when where education, enforcement, engineering, and all those other E's come together, and they make it more impactful, I think.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. On the education, it's important. I'm on not only on the committee, but I'm on a subcommittee for the League of American Bicyclists, Bicycle-Friendly Community, Bronze to Silver Committee. And what that is, the League is a very old bicycle advocacy group in the United States. Goes back to the beginnings of cycling in the country, and they've advocated for better roads and better cycling conditions. Anyway, they rate all the cities that decide to join their program in the bike-friendly community. And here's the city of Santa Clara's rating that you can get online. And where we do really bad, that we've improved just lately, is in education. We got a rating of 2 out of 10, which is pretty low. I'm sorry, 1 out of 10, education. So we weren't reaching enough students. Our last program was half the schools. I understand it's quite a bit more. I think we got a long ways to go. We're going to, I've requested the book from this organization on the education that is age appropriate. And I'm also looking at some of their parameters for increasing cycling for students. They have tips. Anyway, I will go over a couple items in terms of the safe routes to school, because it is such an important item in the cycling community. They say that we should expand the Safe Routes to School program, and it should be a routine part of primary and secondary education. Right now, we're not reaching the high school students at all. And I think we only have one middle school. Did you get both?
Right now, I'll let you finish and then I'll
Okay.
respond.
Yeah, anyway, we need to get the high school students. I happen to live at Pomeroy and Benton, near Santa Clara High, and also the elementary school, Stratford and Pomeroy Elementary down the street. And I see a lot of cyclists riding on the sidewalk. And as you know, it's illegal in the city to ride on the sidewalk, unfortunately. And it is not safe. Cyclists do not consider riding on the sidewalk safe. So a big item on my list is to get a bike lane on Benton Street, and also, because of the high school, and also one on Monroe, where the other high school is too. And we've actually had the public come in and talk about the Monroe one. I'm not as familiar with that one. But we have high school students right now riding on the sidewalk fast. Other cities do allow cycling on sidewalks. Sunnyvale has a very detailed law about riding on sidewalks. I'd like to see that instituted here. Okay, anyway, I'll just list one other couple items about safety for kids. We had another member on this committee who has unfortunately left the subcommittee and the bicycle committee. But here's one that other cities are considering, Walnut Creek. I just heard about this on the news. Identify which school area corridors are eligible for reduced speed limits of 15 to 20 miles per hour and implement them as part of Safe Routes to School program. This was identified in the report in our city after analyzing the results of our current program. And I was trying to think how we could get more kids to ride, because they're actually living very close to school but not riding, or walking for that matter. So we need to look at that. I'd like to bring some ideas up to the BPAC, reducing the speed limit or getting some bike lanes on some of these local streets, the one where the houses are. Maybe we need to put the lanes there, which has, you know, the 25-mile-per-hour streets. Maybe we need the lanes there to, you know, let the parents know that they're going to be somewhat, you know, a lot safer with some striping. So anyway, this is just one element of 5 elements that we are rated on by the League of American Bicyclists, but that's the worst one that we're trying to address right now. The other big one that Thomas Granvold is big on, I'm sure he'll speak to that, is the complete streets. And that means streets that are designed not just for motor vehicles, but for bicycles and pedestrians, and we don't have that here. And it should be a requirement of new development, and we should retrofit some of our streets too. And I think Thomas can speak better on that. But that's what I have. It's quite a list, but those are the big things.
Did you want to say anything now? Or you?
First of all, I want to say thank you for Ken for volunteering for this committee. I appreciate all his effort that he's doing. He's been working at this for probably about a year now. So I do appreciate that, Ken.
Use your microphone.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I was just acknowledging Ken's work there. You mentioned that about the secondary and high schools. The approach that we're taking is we're trying to reach out to the elementary schools first, and the idea as they progress up, we are now approaching the middle schools. We're dealing with 2 middle schools at this point, and then eventually we hope to get into the high schools. But it was an idea was just to build that foundation with the amount of money we had available. Let's hit the elementaries first and progress upwards. It wasn't that we didn't want to address the high schoolers. So that's the rationale behind that decision.
Thomas?
Okay, a couple things. Complete Streets, you started to mention that, so I'll go briefly. Complete Streets is a outline of a program to make streets available to all users of the streets. Historically, going back to the beginning of the 20th century, the streets were available to everybody. And everybody, from kids playing in the streets to carts and so on, and that had been in place for a great many years. The advent of the automobile changed all that. And the idea of Complete Streets is at least to get back to some of that, so that there is a space for pedestrians, there is a space for bicyclists, there's a space for everybody, and a safe space. and that's important. Not only safe, but seen as safe by the people using it, because people won't get out on their bicycles or even walking sometimes if they don't perceive that it's safe. And there's that. I also wanted to talk about one of the things that's coming up this year is the bicycle plan. We're redoing the bicycle plan for the city this year. The reason that's important for several reasons. What it does is it lays out a goal of what we would like the city to be able to do at some point in the future, hopefully not too long in the future. And it'll list a whole series of things that can be done, and we'll prioritize them. Why that's important is a lot of the grants that we get this money from, a requirement is that it has to be in the city's bicycle plan. So we could come up with ideas that are great, but if they're not in the bicycle plan, that will limit funding sources. But what I've seen happen a lot of times is we have these great bicycle plans, it looks good on paper, but the way things end up working is money is limited. We can apply for grants, we could do this little section here, we can do that little section there, and it's piecemeal. And it doesn't all fit together so that it can work together and actually become something much more than it is now. I'd like to see a more commitment by the city to these plans and to some of these projects. We've done a lot of the easy ones. We're getting to the point where some of the harder ones are popping up at the top of the list. Ken mentioned a couple, and that's in front of the high schools. It's not easy because those are both fairly heavy traffic streets. And there's always resistance to removing lanes or removing parking, as we know on Prune Ridge. Prune Ridge is another project. It's on the VTA, countywide bike plan. San Jose is building out to the city limit to meet up with Prune Ridge. And all of a sudden, that bike lane is going to stop because we don't have it there. It takes not only the money to do it, but it takes political will to push that forward.
Are you talking from Winchester to San Tomas Expressway?
Yep. Oh, at least that
all
much.
the way down
Actually, all the way to
Pomeroy.
Lawrence.
Pomeroy?
Yep.
Pomeroy, yeah.
Because
And it
this,
goes, yeah.
this is what we do not any longer call the road diet. We call it the roadway allocation program. So,
Sounds a lot better.
yeah.
Well, yeah, sometimes names are important.
Right, because we stopped at Pomeroy, and then BPAC had put it on the list to continue to the San Jose border at Winchester. And San Jose has completed their portion all the way to downtown. So, but we encountered a few bumps in the road, shall we say.
But what happens if we aren't able to go ahead is these things remain piecemeal. And we don't truly have a connected network that people really can use and becomes something that more people are likely to use. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind going forward here. The other thing that's coming up, assuming that we get the grant, is a pedestrian plan for the city. Hopefully we'll get the grant for that and can go ahead and produce the plan. So anyway, that's my comments for the moment.
Yeah. Craig? I think Craig looks ready.
If I may. Thanks for my colleagues for expressing a lot of the issues that we share in common. I guess I wanted to address more of the structure of the committee as it is. As it is an advisory committee, we only have so much. We have no right for approval on any type of plans for development, things of that nature. So all we can really do is advise. We meet 5 times a year. And as you know, with the amount of activity that has been happening within the city of Santa Clara, that really doesn't cover it. Oftentimes, there's an item that comes up before on the city council agenda that we hasn't been vetted by us in any fashion at all, because the time that it takes and the preparation, and then either we hold a special meeting or completely unaware of that item that's going to be on the agenda to be able to meet as a committee of the whole to talk and make some sort of suggestions. We've also had some conversations in the past about, well, could we advance this from being an advisory committee to something that has more power, such as our planning, like a commission? I'm not sure what that would take as far as the legal processes are concerned, but that would give us more weight as far as when we do have a development, that developers' plans mesh well with the transportation systems that are available in that area, such as what's happening with Santa Clara Square. So the Santa Moss Creek Trail was augmented to allow ramp and stairs access to the Creek Trail right there by 101 and the Creek Trail, which is great. And there are some places where there's kind of ad hoc use or entrances to the Creek Trail that people just kind of, they cut fences and they get their way in there. So there's some of those things that weren't taken into consideration when some of these plans were put into place. So I would like us to have more frequent meetings. I would like us to have more of an authority within the development in our city for the transportation needs that are only going to become more critical.
Hi, I'm fairly new, I'm completely new to the committee. And so I'm still learning a lot of the details on certain aspects of things like the education and the organization of the committee and how that works. I have a lot of experience with building the things in the city, building the trails, building all that stuff. So at this point, my emphasis would be on pushing towards, first and foremost, maintaining what we already have. The trails, generally speaking, are in good shape. Parts of them I built back when I had like almost jet black hair. I mean, it was a long time ago.
You could have it if you like.
And the trail is looking that aspect of it. There's things like that we need to kind of advise on, that's bring it to the attention that things like that need to be maintained. From my perspective, extending things we already have, we already discussed it, like Prune Ridge, which I agree, the road diet is a terrible name. I think of it as a safety feature because you're adding that middle double left turn lane. So, because I drive down it all the time and I don't have to stop in the fast lane and hope that I don't get killed. So I always said, hey, that's a great idea. And we just put in some bike lanes as an aside. But selling that kind of thing. I noticed our last meeting, Dennis was commenting. It's working exactly the way it's supposed to. And it's actually not holding people up, but you get a perspective. That first 2 weeks when it was awful. And then people learn how to drive it and they realize, yes, the signals are long enough and you get there the same amount of time, but you have to sell these things a little bit. And that's part of the committee's job is the way I look at it. The last thing, hopefully before we leave this, from my perspective, I'd really like, you guys are the boss. You're the elected people. What does the council's, not specific to any detail, but what are your general concepts on what would you like to see with pedestrians, because it's bicycle and pedestrian, what would you like us to work on? And also bicycles, sort of just philosophical approaches, what would you like us to take?
I think we're all going to have our comments,
Oh,
so
good.
we want to hear from you first.
Okay.
You're the stars of the show today, so.
Don, did you want to say anything?
No, I'm pretty new to this, so although I bike a lot, as you might be able to tell, it was a little hotter today than I expected, so it took me a little longer to get here. Sorry about that. But yeah, I think that the city really has, although we're only rated 2, I guess bronze, on the as being bicycle friendly, the Santa Moss-Aquino Trail is really very useful for me and it's used by quite a bit. There's a little section that needs some repair. And another interesting thing is, a lot of, you hear about sort of some antagonism between bicycles and cars, and sometimes bicycles don't always obey all the rules of the road and cars resent that and vice versa. But I found that actually, by far most of the time, cars yield to me when I don't really have right of way, so we're coming up to a 4-way stop and you try to make eye contact and all that stuff and eventually they want you to go on. So we're actually pretty courteous here is my experience. And Los Padres has a really good wide bike lane compared to most. It's very nice that even there's cars parked all along the way, there's still, the bike lane's bigger than the car lane, I noticed. But it includes parking, you know, so that's, but, so the city has done a lot, and I look forward to being able to figure out how we can improve things.
Can I add that I echo that. I feel very safe in Santa Clara, biking in Santa Clara, especially with a baby seat back there, like very courteous. Even on San Tomas, we biked them on Lawrence and San Tomas, and cars, that's a wide enough bike lane where we felt enough, where it's safe enough. So it's a nice area to bike in, I agree. But when we did a survey for Mission College, the #1 concern was that students were afraid for safety. That's the #1 concern. Safety for themselves, safety from the drivers. So it's a stigma, and that's there. It's just, you have 98% of the population driving, 2% is biking or walking to school. So for our Mission College, but there's a fear there, right? So that stigma sticks, and then they're afraid to use the streets. So, but from my perspective, I think it's improved a lot in the last 10 years. So I feel a lot safer biking in Santa Clara, San Jose, Sunnyvale, all around around our neighborhood. So I do appreciate that concept. It's safe here.
One of the things about education that and safety that strikes me this time of year along San Tomas Aquino bike trail is, as a bicyclist, it's my responsibility to be well lit, to light both the trail ahead of me and to be well lit myself. There are some bicyclists who have no lights at all, and it's a shared use trail. And there's pedestrians and joggers who, some of them have really nice reflectors and so forth. It's not their obligation to be lit, but to be reflectorized is a very nice thing. But there are some that aren't at all, and there's a bicyclist running or going without any lights at all. I'm really worried about some accidents that can happen along there. So part of that is education, and part of that is good sense, I guess.
I could say one more thing about the education. That's a good point. And we, in this city, we have no adult education, bicycle education programs. And that is one of the key elements on the bronze to silver rating with the bike-friendly community of the League of American Bicyclists.
That's really important that the adults be educated as well, because then they're going to monitor their children, and that's how they're going to grow up and learn in terms of riding their bicycles. I mean, I had my bike, and my husband didn't put on a helmet. I said, what? He goes, I don't want to do that. And I said, well, you're doing this in front of our children now, right? So I had to educate him too. He didn't take it well, but it's really important, I think, in terms of, you know, things that we can do with the school district in terms of education and educating the parents. And then I was thinking about some of the things you said all along the creek trail, people aren't wearing reflective gear and things like that. Maybe we can look at some kind of signage or something with some kind of recommendations and advice. Maybe you can look at that for us, what you would recommend, so that people don't get hurt on the trails, especially when the lights are, you know, when it's sunset is a lot earlier now and other things. So, you know, to avoid those kinds of things, because more and more people are using the trails and the streets as a form of real transportation now. It's not just a, you know, an outdoor activity that they're doing on the side. People are relying on that now to get out of their cars, and really there's a lot of real substantive use of our trail system. So we're gonna have to treat it as such, that is important and as heavily used as it is.
And, you know, I know some of the various like health-related groups and transportation agencies like give out, you know, they'll have like you know, some kind of like a battery-operated light. I mean, you know, I know that with the consultant that we're using from Safe Moves, I guess she has access to something else. You know, like we're looking at bike helmets for kids, and I think she mentioned that it was for a cost of $3.50 we'll be able to provide helmets to students whose maybe their families can't afford the expense of the helmet. And maybe we could, you know, I've got a bunch of these lights that I've at different conferences and things that I've gone to or meetings where they pass them out. Maybe we could start some kind of effort to say, you know, be safe, be seen, or something, or be seen, be safe. You know, because you know, I mean, you know, and I noticed like Ken has his reflective vest and, you know, and all of that, that's, even if you've got lights, and I always most of the time forget mine, but, you know, a lot of those things, because when you do see, and this is, I think, one of the things, the fear factor, I may say some things about it later, but, you know, one of the things we've looked at in the committee, and I've brought up when we had our goal setting, was the idea of looking at like Project Zero, because the number of accidents involving cyclists and pedestrians is it is kind of scary what's gone on. And so I think, you know, as if we want to really pursue the complete streets and some of those things, and to have people really feel comfortable, we've got to address some of those statistics that, you know, that deter people from, you know, even wanting to walk. I mean, I've had parents say to me, I don't think it's safe for my kids to walk to school, because they're afraid, you know, well, besides the other, you know, the criminal element that, you know, drivers, you know, are so, they talk about, if you look at some of the, even unfortunately, the serious accident rate and the fatality rate has been going up again, and a lot of the studies are attributing it to distracted driving. And so that's even something that happens in relatively residential areas, where some of these accidents are happening, are not like on the expressways. They're happening there too, but they're also happening in more neighborhood areas.
Could I add something to the bike helmet idea? I think you're going to be voting on a grant that the police department's going to receive. One of the items on that grant is they're going to distribute 300 helmets, and they're also going to put out flyers about pedestrian safety. Supposedly it's bicycle and pedestrian safety, but I don't see anything geared towards bicycling on the grant proposal. A lot of pedestrian things are going to go out in the community, but the one thing that was bicycle related was the helmet giveaway. So yeah, there's some, it sounds like some people in the police department are thinking our way too.
Yeah, just a little bit on the safety thing. Most of us on the committee are experienced bicyclists and have been riding a long time. And what we perceive as being safe or reasonably safe is not what a occasional or even new bicyclist will see. That's entirely a different thing. And to get them out onto the streets, we have to go farther than what we might think be necessary. One of the things I think, you know, to consider is protected bike lanes. That's going to be perceived as much more safe than just a stripe on the road between you and the cars. I just wanted to make that comment. And secondly, we live in a culture that's car-centric and has been for a long time. And is that sustainable in the future? And my personal viewpoint is not, for various reasons. You can think of global warming from that point of view. You can think of congestion on the streets. Our population is increasing, means more cars on the streets, but we don't have a lot of space to make bigger roads. It's just not there, you know. And so what do? We got to slowly and step by step move away from the car-centric society. It's not going to be easy, but it's necessary. And bicycling is a portion of it. Pedestrians are a portion of it. Transit systems are a portion of it. But it's going to have to be done. And if it's not done, it's going to be forced on us, probably in unpleasant ways. So anyway, just my 2 cents.
I just wanted to say, one of our pet peeves, I'm sure that everybody shares with, is the condition of the road surface on El Camino Real. And it is quite bone-shaking. But I guess my question into the city is, what influence do we have on the state as far as how El Camino ends up once it's resurfaced, rebuilt, whatever? How can we influence what that looks like to make sure it serves the citizens of Santa Clara? Because the state's just going to do their job and they'll be gone. None of those people are going to ever use that roadway, most likely. You know, we're left with whatever they do. So that's one. My understanding is that it's scheduled to be resurfaced in the 2019 timeframe. How long is that? You know,
2017.
2019.
Well, it got moved out.
It
It
got
got moved out, and then
2017.
Rajiv told me he thought it was going to come back in a little bit. So,
Do we know where that is now? Does anyone know?
I can find out.
Yeah. find out for us where that.
And what's the answer to his question? Because that's a good one. How much influence do we have?
Well, as I mentioned, so on Thursday, the long absent El Camino Policy Advisory Board from VTA is going to reconvene. And I will be there representing Santa Clara, and there'll be representatives of all the cities along El Camino, because, I'd say about a year and a half ago, Thomas used the phrase political will. So as we all know about what happened with bus rapid transit and the conversations around that. And so they were going to, do a pilot, and they just decided there was so little lack of any kind of consensus as to where to go. And I have said, hey, we really, we need to are we going to do anything? Or are we going to relook at that? And I particularly feel like if there's going to be a pilot and maybe a decision or whatever, if that could happen at the same time as with Caltrans, because what VTA was going to do was they were going to go out and get grants to try to convert, do a lot of work on the roadway, and perhaps I had my alternative that I liked, and it included eliminating the street parking and having a protected bike lane and an increased sidewalk for pedestrians. And, I can let everybody know after Thursday what it is there, because things were getting so mishmashed, they had come up with about literally like 20 different various configurations. So I think in answer to your question, I'll have a better idea to see, like I said, if there's any willingness to come to any kind of, consensus along the corridor for what we could, because that's the way that we could get some grant funding, is if, and I know, like I said, some of our sisters or cities to the north along El Camino really weren't interested. And so it'll be harder, like if we could do, if there was the will and we decided to make a priority, if we had the funding, we could put in some of those changes just in Santa Clara, but where it really will be effective if Palo Alto, Mountain View, Los Altos, Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, and San Jose agree to do something, or to pursue something. But so I can't even predict what it is, what's going to be said by the representatives from those cities.
Yeah, I can understand the quandary you're in on these big projects. I just want to remind everyone that, in my opinion, I consider cycling much more local. So if we were able to improve just our city, it's going to help people. There's a lot of people that are employees of those businesses that line El Camino. This is where we need to do a complete street, maybe, as Tom says, with a separated barrier. By the way, you should know that we have people, I have public that come up to me and tell me where to look on the internet. The safety record of the streets is public. You can find it on the internet, and I have people helping me with that. El Camino Real is our most dangerous street for cyclists in the city. And it's probably due to the driveways. I'm not really sure. But, the chaos of trying to find a place to park and get through those driveways. So I would like to see that separated bike lane on El Camino Real. And maybe if you have to, I'll give you a little history. 20 years ago, I asked for this at the council. I've lived in the city for 40 years. And they very respectively got the Chamber of Commerce representative to speak at the council. And that person said, this is not possible. Basically, there's very few cars that really park on El Camino Real, but there's the one or two, that's a sale. So they said, and the council didn't even discuss it. They just said, nope, not going to do it. So maybe you need to talk to the chamber and see what we need to do to get those one or two extra cars off the street into a parking structure or a publicly financed place to park, if we have to do it that way, because that would save some lives and also give us that start on the complete streets.
I have a referral, I guess, to our city manager about, we're doing the specific plan on the El Camino, and I'm wondering, is this part of it? Could it be part of it that we look at the bike trails, the bike lanes on the El Camino as part of the specific plan process?
I really need to work with our staff to
Yeah,
find
I
out
don't
what
know
the,
the
it's a
answer.
state and ours is land use and specific plan is for development and
Yeah.
not transportation planning. And so I heard the suggestion and I want to get back. I'll get back through my weekly report and I'll push that out through Carol to BPAC members in terms of what authority and or how does the city influence. But in terms of the specific plan, we could add a value in there about how do we promote issues around bicycling and pedestrian safety and the higher pedestrian activity.
Yeah, I had some thoughts about that too. And just so you know, full disclosure, to me, a bike lane is that space between cars that I can ride my Harley when traffic is bad. But what I'm thinking is the specific plan, yes, but also some of these major developments that are going in, which are mixed-use developments. They'll have housing, they'll have commercial, they'll have office, and they're blocks. I mean, they're blocks and blocks big, not just the related project, but there's several others. And why can't we have this complete streets concept be part of what we require of conditions of approval on all of these projects going forward? And even on El Camino, if we can't affect the street, I understand it's a state highway, but we can affect what developers put in, you know, from the curb back. And sometimes maybe it is just a broader sidewalk. As someone said, you could ride on the sidewalk if there's enough space or if there's delineation or if there's a barricade or something. You know, I can remember some major cities like Beijing where they have car lanes, they have parking, then they have the bike lane, so it's not interfering with parking, people coming and going, and then they have pedestrian lane. And it all can fit, but you have to plan for it. So I would like to see us start to plan for that in all of these major developments especially. And also, if we can take up that adult education piece as a partnership with Santa Clara Unified School District, and through their adult education program, maybe through Mission College as well. My other thought is, it might be helpful to have a representative from the Bike Advisory Committee attend architectural review meetings so that you can see these plans as they go forward and you can have your input and say, you know, you should have creek trail access here, or you should have, you know, a bike lane here, because that way you get this input at the very basic planning stage before, you know, approvals are granted often. And you can get that built in as part of the plans as these, especially the major developments, because we have a lot in the pipeline. And to get in and sort of on the ground floor so that developers know that they should be putting these things into their developments.
Hi, just a couple things. One's a question. I know that we can't do everything on a state highway, but can we prohibit parking? I mean, is that within the authority of the city of Santa Clara?
I think it is.
Okay, it is. At least I'm seeing more yeses than nos.
We'll have to have some city manager and the city attorney can research that. I think so, but I'm not the expert.
Do you know Dennis?
Yes.
Oh, Dennis.
Actually,
Hi,
I'd like to take the opportunity to kind of answer some of the questions. As far as parking, that is regulated by the city along El Camino Real. And the state is actually in the process of designing the pavement rehabilitation this year right now. And construction is due to start fiscal year 18-19. And then as far as planning for bicycle lanes on state routes, the state is actually in the process of updating their state bicycle plan. And I think we've forwarded links and notices to the bicycle committee in the past also, but we'll re-forward that to the committee also and then send it to the city manager. And also staff is in the process, as the committee knows, of updating the city's bicycle plan. So that would be another appropriate venue to reflect the city's desire for bicycle lanes on El Camino Real, in addition to the El Camino specific plan and also in the BRT studies that VTA is going through.
Yeah, just briefly, it was mentioned on some of these new projects, especially the bigger ones coming in. and where it would be ideal to have complete streets incorporated in it. I think what it would really help in that regard is for the city to have an official position on complete streets, so that it is, the developers are coming in and they'll see, oh, the city requires complete streets for our new projects. If you don't, then it's a fight to get them to do that. So for the city to take some kind of official position on that would, I think, be a great help when these projects come up.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. It should be administrative. It shouldn't be us, meaning individual bike committee members, sending things off to the state, which is fine. That's what Dennis wants us to do. But we would like to see, you folks jump on, if it comes from the city of Santa Clara City Council to those organizations, it means a lot more than me writing one little email. And I think that's what Tom's getting at. It should be administrative. We got to work out the details and make it so it's not something we have to review every time after the fact, usually is how it works now.
I think that I don't know where we are with our bicycle plan for the city, whether we have one.
It's in process. So
It's in process?
At the very beginning.
I think we need to look at the overall bicycle plan for the city and what can we include in the bicycle plan. I think there's so many opportunities, as Councilmember May had mentioned. We have big developments such as the related company City Place, where you can almost plan your entire routes through there with our 35-acre or so north Central Park, which we want to connect to all the trails and everything else. I mean, it's like a blank slate at this point, which we definitely want your input on and your expertise. I think I heard you want us to make more use of your experience and expertise, and we don't want that to go to waste, especially when we have these enormous opportunities on the new developments, but also in the overall bike plan for the city. People, again, are using bicycles as alternate ways of transporting themselves, and things are going to change in the future because it has to change. We can't continue as being the car-centric society that we are. There's going to be forced changes, and we just need to prepare for that and prepare our infrastructure. So this bicycle plan is good. I just want to make a couple more comments and then we'll go around the room. We're also talking to bike sharing companies. I know I've talked to one, Teresa has, and maybe others on the council, some bike sharing companies especially that have offered pilot programs around Mission College and those areas there. So we're really seriously looking at that. Those things are great because it doesn't cost the city any money, but yet they provide a service. So it's finding the right people with the right programs for that. Central Park Course. We have the ever-popular Santa Moss Creek Trail near the stadium. Believe it or not, we're still working on that to get that open. We vow that we will at some point. It won't be today, but it's going to happen. So there's a lot of desire around, seeing how important that trail is and keeping it open. And I think that's it for me. I just wanted to say we want to use your expertise, and we have not been using it in the way we should have, and we see that now, and that's the reason for these dinners, so we can really hear you loud and clear with how we need to improve our relations and communication and your offer to help as well.
Yeah, this is minor. I totally agree with everything Lisa said and Craig said, mainly that we get to weigh in on these projects. It should not be at an architectural committee. There's really no reason for us to go to those. It would be much better if we were to get the projects given to us by our engineers here in the early stages. If there's even a possibility that bicycle access or bicycle use or whatever will be part of that development or whatever it is or that street change or whatever it is that's coming down the pike, so that we can weigh in at that point, and having meetings more often will make that a lot easier to do.
Right. We did that on the big one, like we did that on City Place. We had them come in and their transportation consultants, and I think maybe on Santa Clara Square and one of the others. So, but I agree that we should look at the ones that are of any magnitude, or even say like when we do like the Tasman East specific plan or something. Patty?
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on that, Diane, because the purpose of being at the architectural meeting is because plans get changed, as we all know. They get changed through the process. And we have an HLC member who sits on the architectural committee, can be there when there's a historic property there, just to make sure that what your committee approved is followed through on those plans. And so that you could give advice to the architectural committee members on the spot, especially if something has been changed, because things do change. And it's very helpful, I think, to the committee members to hear that, because it's the council member and 2 planning commission members, and they may not have ever heard your input. They just get the plans as they're presented. So it's just sort of a check and balance to have you there as an advisor to the architectural committee to make sure the plans are followed through. My other thought, somebody mentioned lights and safety, and when I think of lights, I think of Silicon Valley Power, and I think that would kind of perhaps be a good giveaway project for Silicon Valley Power, to give away bike lights to kids, to schools, to anyone. And then that, of course, the city doesn't have the budget for that, but Silicon Valley Power has that public benefits charge that they have to spend money on projects like that. So perhaps that's something we can refer to them.
Councilmember Mahan, do you mean the Planning Commission rather than the Architectural?
No, Architectural Committee, because that's where you actually look at the details of the plans.
I was a little
The down and
wondering about
dirty details, exactly
Okay.
what goes where. You look at the traffic circulation plan, you look at the ingress and egress, you look where the driveways go. You look at that level of detail, which is where your input would be really helpful.
And that's changeable at that point. I thought the Planning Commission would be more appropriate because they deal with land use and the street, whereas the architectural looks at just the buildings
The
usually.
actual plans, yeah, the architectural committee can't change the entitlements, the heights, the number of units, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But they can have input into traffic circulation and all of that stuff.
Even on a city street?
Mhm.
Okay, I didn't know that. By the way, Mayor Gilmore mentioned, we do, in case you are not aware of, this is the last full bicycle plan update that we have, that I have. Actually, there's an update, but this is the full thing. So it's something that I think is available online. It's something you might want to take a look at because it has maps of what we're doing and what this group has decided to do, and it has crash collision statistics in the city, which is handy.
Is that up to date, Ken?
Huh?
Is that up to date?
No, but I have, it's been updated periodically.
That plan, when
We
is that
have a
from?
consultant, so that is actually expired, and that's why we've
Right,
been
but
kinda
I wanted to
behind on
show
our
you that
grants.
this is what it looks like,
Okay.
and it gets updated periodically with smaller, thinner
Right, there's been a
things.
couple updates.
So, yeah, and it would include a map showing you where we're trying to put facilities, and that's what we consult when we look at it. But it's something maybe you should be aware of, so if you're making decisions about land use, that maybe include that in the development. And maybe the Planning Commission and the Architectural Committee should be aware of that too. So, I mean, for us to go to all these meetings, that means that it just seems like they don't come to our meetings. So I'm not sure we want to, I mean, that would be nice, but we're stretched too. So it seems like,
But just be one representative, and just when projects
yeah,
come up. that-
Well, yeah,
that you
it's a good
gotta
idea.
input too.
Maybe we can talk about that at the next
Yeah,
meeting.
sure.
Other council members?
Yes, thank you. I don't remember was it Jim? You asked a question about what you thought we could kind of advise you on?
Yes.
Okay, that was you?
That was me.
Okay. I'm totally, okay. So I live on the south side on Prune Ridge I live on Mauricia, actually.
Oh, okay.
And so that is a nightmare over there, as you all know. And I think what happened was it was a Band-Aid, I want to just say that, approach when they put the so-called road diet in with the bicycle lanes. What happened was that is a drive-through street. That is where people come from the other side of Santa Clara and drive through to get to the other side of Santa Clara. When that was put in, it upset the people from Lawrence Expressway to Pomeroy because there was a road diet. So what happens is when they come off of Lawrence, they zoom down, and then they hit that light, and then they really zoom down the rest of Prune Ridge. So most of the people would love to either get rid of the diet or expand the whole thing down to meet the requirements because everybody's speeding through there. So it's either one way, one whole way, or not a piecemeal approach, and it was a Band-Aid. It is effective, but the problem is that the rest of the street becomes just jammed with people. So I will not personally go to Cronin and make any left-hand turn whatsoever, not unless you want to be T-boned. And it's a really scary position. There's a school there, Eisenhower School, and even at where I live, my cross street is Road Donovan, and in the morning when they're dropping their kids off at school, I almost got hit, I don't know how many times, by moms trying to get their kids to school, and they're not paying attention. So a lot of kids do not ride their bicycles. A lot of parents are dropping their kids off. So that whole area there is really troubled. So if for the plan going forward that Teresa's talking about, I would love to see you finish the rest of Prune Ridge and put the bike lanes in there, because that will be traffic calming for everybody. The people that live on that street will be able to get out of their driveways, and happiness will be for all. It's the thing that when we do these little pieces of piecemeal things, it creates another problem, and then that's why you have everybody all crazed. So we've had a few meetings. There was one very egregious one at the Central Park Library, and the residents there were all in arms because they can't even get out of those streets over there. They're very upset. And there's a lot of accidents, a lot of them unreportable, because the police don't take reports on like a little hit and bump kind of a thing. So we don't really have a lot of statistics to really base what's happening over there. But what I would like to see in your all plan is to finish Prune Ridge and bring it all the way down to San Jose, so that the people that are going from Lawrence Expressway or Apple have a direct route, and maybe we'll take the bicycle instead. And it would help that road diet tremendously. So that's the one I would really want to work on or add to your plan. Just let's finish one thing and move on to the next, instead of like this little thing going on. I'll get to you, Tom, sorry. And then the second thing in education, Ken, you brought up a really big point. I was born and raised in suburbia, back there. Okay, we rode our bikes everywhere. There wasn't a safety issue, everybody had bicycles, and we all rode them to school and back. So the education part, not only is it healthy for these kids to start riding these bicycles, but just have a way, or that education. I believe if you don't start at this ground level, you're not gonna get here. Because when I got into high school, the only thing I could think about was getting a car. So if you don't get these kids here, when you here is gonna be even harder for you to try to get them to transition out. It's not gonna happen. My husband is a big bike rider. He scares me when he goes out. He just runs to the grocery store just to get something, and I go, "You're crossing Stevens Creek," you know, and I get like, oh my God, and San Tomas Expressway. I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, is he coming back with a quart of milk? I mean, it's like one of those things that really bothers you, but I kind of ride around in my neighborhood, but that's because the streets are safe there. I don't have through traffic going through my neighborhood. But I think if we looked at this holistically and looked at a plan that will finish something and then move on to the next thing, and also the education, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You pretty much have that online, and that could help them go forward with some of these projects. And back to the reflective thing, I agree with Councilmember Mahan. We have Silicon Valley Power. They love to do little things. So maybe there's something that we can do with that creek trail out there. I know that we can't put lights out because we have species that can't have the light or whatever, but maybe there's something else that we can put out there, that reflective stuff on the ground, to, you know, like the little lights that they have. Maybe that won't be so invasive as to the indigenous species out there, but a way of a clear path, because I know that people live in my area love to use the creek trail to get up to Levi Stadium because it's safer. They feel safer. And the kids do. So those are just like kind of my comments, and maybe we could work out some marketing stuff to help get the word out there. I agree that I know you all come to some of our council meetings, and it's almost like after the fact, and I know Ken comes with his drawings and says, wait a second, we can do this. But he's already passed that plan, and it's frustrating, and I get that. So maybe we need to get down on that ground roots level where we can say, how do we put this into that little package? And the mayor did bring up the point of City Place. There's a 35-acre park out there. We want to do contiguous park, you know, trails, whatever will work for us to help people to get around Santa Clara a little easier and enjoy nature for a change instead of looking at the back of somebody's car. So anyway, those are just my comments and thoughts.
Okay, just briefly here, you mentioned Prune Ridge and how it's only done on a portion of it. That kind of relates back to what I was saying about piecemeal implementation. We would love to see all of Prune Ridge done. I think that's pretty consensus on the committee. But the way things happen is we get this grant, we get that grant, and it's usually not enough to do it all. So we do what we can. And unless there's another source of money or some other method of doing this, it's not going to get all done at the same time. That's just unfortunate.
We agree, and we're going to refer that to our city manager's office to help us come up with an overall holistic plan on this. Deanna, is there something?
I think the sequencing would be to get the bike plan finished as a goal and then look for funding strategies. But you're absolutely correct. That's been the experience in other cities that I've worked in, is it really is reliant on grant funding, and grants drive which projects are successful in each city, unfortunately.
I know. Thank you. I want to finish with the council members, and then, because we have a closed session that we have to get to, sorry.
I just wanted to throw in a few things. My husband rides all the time. If you came to our garage, you'd see how many bikes he has, and you would know. He does triathlons too, so he really likes to ride, and you look just like him right now, actually. Well, the clothes, I should say. But you know, I just wanted to reiterate that, you know, I really feel like it is important that you have a say-so when, you know, these projects are coming forward. You know, we usually get together, like for Tasman East, for instance, and people come out and they say, this is how where we want the trees and this is where we want the buildings. Well, I think you should be there to say this is where we want the bike lanes and this is where we want the complete streets, and to add that as well, because the nice thing is people take pictures of that, and so that you can say, see, this is what we came up with and this was our plan. So I think it's very important that you definitely be a part of that process. Bike to Work Day, I know, is a great opportunity to get the word out and share, you know, educate people about how to share the road and how to be safe, more safe on the road. I mean, I see with a husband who rides all the time, I take notice of people riding their bikes, and I see a lot of people with not wearing reflective gear, and I just think they're crazy. But it is very, very important to be protective on the road. And regarding the topic of education, I wondered if there was some way we could partner with some of our local businesses, like Summit Bikes, for instance, you know, if they could have something in their shop, for instance, and invite people to come in, and then people would see all the different things that they need to be safer on the road. Everything would be accessible there. So I just wanted to throw that out as a thought, to just partner with some of our local businesses and see if we can develop relationships there to, again, you know, just get this message out about being safe. And that's all I'm going to say, because I know we're running out of time. Thank you.
Dominic?
I disagree with Craig. I agree with Craig that we should have you guys meeting at least once a month. And someone that's in education every day, we have to make it cool to drive, to get out of a car and get in a bike. And I think we have the mechanisms with the Mission City, West Valley, and the school district to work on this. And maybe we could have one of you actually be at these meetings in the future. A lot of other things were said already, but I appreciate your passion and service.
Thank you. Patty? Teresa? Any closing statements? Yes, closing.
Just a quickie. With regard to prunage again, I'm under the distinct impression in my time here that what's built is built, and at least, and correct me if I'm wrong, from staff's perspective, we're not really looking profoundly at extending that because of the tremendous negative reaction. Is that true? And is
well, they're probably looking for some direction from the council before proceeding with anything else, I would imagine. But we haven't really given any direction on that. So
could they look into the possibility of getting grants, of just even seeing if we can get some money for it, and then you can always say no to a grant. But.
Right. We're going to refer this to our city manager's office to bring back some options for us, because not only for, you know, Prune Ridge in terms of finishing that off, but, you know, other many of the things we talked about today, to have a follow-up on that. And this needs another discussion and possibly a big study session at the open council meeting. To talk about it. It's that important, so.
Thank you.
Can I also say that I appreciate the holistic approach, and I think you mentioned the enforcement where not a lot gets reported. If it needs to be holistic, enforcement needs to, like, why is it only cars to cars get that police attention where pedestrians to cars or pedestrians to, or bicyclists to pedestrians, those things get not reported, right? So there's a mentality of not reporting everything because maybe it costs of less value or just too much time or something, but all the E's need to be involved so that project can be successful. Not only education, not only enforcement, but it has to be together, I think.
Those are important points, yes. Okay, public, quickly?
One of the things that you guys have never updated is you've never updated your transportation impact fee. And I think as you're doing all these developments, you're not charging that fee. And I think what you should be doing that for one thing. And I think the whole idea of a BPAC fee should be included in there. And I think that it shouldn't be like you should be begging for money. This group should not be begging for money. You shouldn't be having to find money and hunt for it and get grants to do projects. It should become a priority that's always in the budget, that's always included. I think we're doing this ass backwards. So that should have been done a long time ago, and I believe you asked staff to do it at least a year ago to come back with a calculation of where the comparison is on what other cities were charging and what we were charging, and I don't believe we ever got that report from staff, and I think that was asked for a long time ago and we never got it. So if you start implementing that transportation fee, consider walking, biking, wheelchairs as a transportation mode and start putting that money into transportation, including what they're talking about here. As for Prunridge, before we go forward and do it, let's not have another problem like we did before. That was done so poorly, we're still spending millions of dollars to undo how badly that was done. We had the money, we spent the money. I'm not convinced they should have ever done it at all. It was the wrong tool in the wrong place to begin with. So let's not keep doing bad after bad.
Thank you, Deborah.
Let's not move forward too quickly.
Okay. I want to thank you all and thank Councilmember O'Neill for chairing this committee. You do excellent work, and I know you have a lot of spirited discussions and lots of in-depth discussions, and we really appreciate the passion and the energy that you bring to this. It is really important, and we'll do our best to bring it all to the forefront in our decision-making in the future and give you a bigger voice in what we're doing. So thank you for bringing this to our attention, and thank you for enjoying dinner with us.
Well, thanks for inviting us.
Thank you. Thank you all. If we could sit here for just a second, I'm going to call the closed session meeting to order. City Clerk, is there a confirmation of a quorum?
Mayor Gilmore confirming a quorum.
Where are you? Oh, okay, thank you. We have a few items for closed session. Is there any public comment regarding closed session? Yes.
One of the items on the closed session is doing a performance review on the interim city manager, and I'd like to know why.
City attorney.
Interim city attorney, sorry, Deanna. And I was wondering why we were doing a performance review on a contractor who's not a hired employee. I didn't understand why that was on the agenda at all and why we were doing a performance review on a contractor. It just seemed like it didn't make any sense to me.
He's not a contractor, but that's all I can say at this point. He's not a contractor. He's not hired as a contractor. He's an employee.
He is an employee?
Yes, he's an employee.
Okay, I'm
Yes.
sorry, I misunderstood
No,
then. I'm
that's
wrong.
okay.
I stand corrected. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
that correction.
Yes, thank you. Hey. Yeah, what the hell? Well, we're just gonna